Hello and welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about after quite the weekend in the ASCA's backyard. We obviously got to talk about the big winner, Brent Renner, finally back in victory lane for the first time in 2 years. His 20 race winless streak is no more. And the return of BSC's third manufacturer has been all Ford and Chevy going at it these past couple years, but Toyota is back. That's now three in a row for them. We also got to talk about the big heartbreaker. Um, on Saturday. Colin Ward, man, what a tough way to lose it. We're definitely going to spend some time on the second year driver who looks to be a breakout star in 2026. We also got to talk about the reigning Cup Series champion. Is it time to panic for Todd Kidd? Oh boy, he's had a rough start to this new campaign. The Craftsman Series race. Wow, the Craftsman Series lately as a whole has been insane. And we definitely got to talk about that scrap, that battle that everyone saw game out. Tony Noel II versus Caden Dunham. That's the future of the ASCA right there. We'll also talk a little bit of silly season. Jared Ayers not returning to Mike White Racing, which I mean, we all knew it was coming, but we're still going to discuss it anyways. And then we're going to preview the fastest track in the ASCA, West Virginia, and what to expect in the true first litmus test of the new regulations in the Cup Series. So, without further ado, let's get into it. But first, we got to shout out the sports premier partners, Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. You already know. Use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 or more inside the US. Hey, you want to cop a Brent Renner replica diecast? Go ahead and over to Sickle B Diecast / Plan B Sales to do so. Shout out to them and shout out to the ASCA's official merchandise shop. There is no Brent Renner merch in there at the moment, but you can still cop your favorite superstars gear. Randall Woods' farewell tour, what an emotional weekend it was for him. His final time on his hometown streets. You want to cop some of that merch. Yeah, so just, any of your favorite superstars gear you want to buy, go ahead and do it and use coupon code season 12 to save 30% at checkout. And that is an ongoing promotion throughout the remainder of the campaign. So yeah, let's get into it. So Brent Renner, the big topic of discussion, finally a victor at Michael White Racing. And I know that me specifically last season, I think that I listed him as my most disappointing driver last year. And I kind of talked about this on Twitter after the race. Brent Renner has got to be the most streaky driver potentially in ASC history. You know, we talked about it last year. He was awful. I won't even say mediocre. He was awful because you also have to put into context the fact that he was the highest paid driver in the sport last season. And he finished 13th in points and led a grand total of 20 laps. The only race he was even remotely a threat to win was West Virginia. And that was only for the first 20 laps before Diego Urquidy just took off and left the rest of the competition. So Renner was terrible last year, finished well behind breakout star Braden Bennett, even Randall Woods, who many said he had a down year. He was beaten by the guy he replaced, Norm Lester. He was beaten by the guy who replaced him at Running Woods Motorsports, Colin Ward. He was beaten by the guy who many thought might replace Lester at Mike White Racing and Lucas Sambert. He was beaten by everyone last year, 13th in points. Making $13 million a season is simply unacceptable. You just can't have it. So looking forward to this year, we've already seen, a vastly different version of Brent Renner. This is far from the same driver that we saw last year. And I think a big underrated aspect of Renner's kind of resurgence back to the top this year would be his crew chief. They let go of Austin Russell in the offseason. He was originally the interim for Norton Lester, and they kind of just let him carry over. But he and Renner, they were not a good match. They weren't a good marriage, so they had to divorce. And they bring in Nick Orchid's old crew chief, Matt Gregson. And Brent Renner had never won a road course race prior to Saturday. Nick Orchid, obviously one of the most successful road racers in ASCA history. You bring his crew chief over. He knows all of Nick's secrets. He's going to share them with Brent. The rest is history. And now we already see Brent Renner getting it done at a road course and beating, the best of the best. That says it all right there. Matt Grigg's an extremely underrated component of why this 19 team is looking so fast this season. But you look at even last week, second, shootout duels 200. And it was looking like Renner was going to finish second again in, the Subway Grand Prix. But obviously we'll get to why he didn't, why he ended up winning the race. Either way, it's not like it's a Mickey win or anything. His pit crew got him up there. Yeah, he got some help from Randall Woods. Yeah, Colin Ward sold and blew the race. But he had to be at the right place at the right time. It could have been Shane Park there, but it wasn't. You have to, it truly shows why this is a team sport, because without the pit crew, without his teammates' help, without Ward botching it, Renner does not win that race. It's not just about having the fastest car. It's about everyone executing at 110% if you want to win a race at the cup level. And if everyone does not execute, you don't win the race. You end up like the number 48 team. So you end up like Shane Park. You end up like Randall Woods, So all those guys made mistakes. Renner did not. And that's why he was able to come from outside the top 10 to victory lane at the Streets of Computerville. And I think that, for Renner's kind of championship chances this season, I'm just going to say that we'll see, because like I said, he's an extremely streaky driver. There's times where there's seasons, he'll go entire seasons where he's a title contender. Like I look at 2021, 2023, he was a title contender both of those seasons. But then you look at other seasons, like I think, 2022 last year, where he's struggling to even crack the top 10 in points. So, talk to me, I would say probably talk to me after the Windows 300 about, is Brent Renner a title contender? Has he had an impressive start to the season? Yes. But we just don't know. He's insanely inconsistent. We don't know if he's going to be able to put this together for another 15 races. And but obviously a fantastic start to the year. He is the points leader. It is worth noting. And he did win pole at West Virginia last year. So you got to give him credit for that. But again, we're heading there this year with entirely new regulations. Who knows what to expect? Toyota, obviously, though, they are back. It is safe to say that 3 straight victories. They only had 1 in their previous 37 races. They are back. And thank goodness that they are, because it was the Diego and Todd Kidd fights were incredible stuff. But I want to see Braden Bennett. I want to see Randall Woods. And I want to see Brent Renner up there, competing for wins and competing for championships. And eventually it's going to be Tony Doval next season and, whoever they put in the 20 next year. I want to see those guys up and competing for wins. The ASC is in a much better place, when all 3 manufacturers are competitive versus, only 2. So definitely good to see Toyota back up there winning races consistently again. And hopefully they can keep this up. Right now, I'd say things are looking very good for them. And even Ross Jackson as well. I want to see him up there. He's 3rd in points right now. Don't sleep on Ross Jackson. man, this kid is another top 10 finish. He's never been traditionally great at road courses, but he got a top 10. Don't sleep on Ross Jackson right now. So yeah, moving on from the victor to the loser on Saturday, the big loser that is, and Colin Ward. You gotta feel for Colin Ward. You lead 29 of 50 laps. He's leading with 5 laps to go. He's pulling away, entering turn one, and quite frankly, he sold. He blew the corner, locked up, ran wide, and the rest is history. And the thing that gets me about this is I've seen Colin Ward compete in hundreds of races. Obviously he's ran full time in the Craftsman Series since 2023. He's always done his dirt stuff. He's won a bunch of dirt races. I already know that. The Morgantown Nationals, the Lasagna Bowl. He's run those races multiple times. He went on that insane run in January where it seemed like he won pretty much every race he was entered in. He kicks off this season with the W in the Speed Weeks, with the Intel Shootout. Like all this kid does is win. He's won 7 Craftsman Series races, 6 from 2023 to 2024, and that's as a series regular. That is unheard of. A series regular winning 6 races in 2 years is unheard of. I don't even think Randall Woods pulled that off when he was, before he had Cup experience. So that he was easily the most decorated series regular to enter a Cup Series last year, and he proved that he lived up to the hype. I would say he had just had a lot of bad luck that really neutered his final points positioning. Because he had 9 top 10 finishes, 3 top fives, led over 100 laps, well over 100 laps. But he just had 5, 6 DNFs, and I don't think a single one of them were directly like, oh, that's completely on him. Like, I just think a lot of them were wrong place, wrong time, or he blew a tire at Utah, was caught up in the Kid Jackson mess at the Apple 225, that sort of thing. So comes out this year. We just talked about it. He wins the shootout. He wins pole for the 200. In the actual race, he didn't do as well as we expected. He led the first 11 laps, but then, he finishes 7th. And then we get to this weekend and he qualifies outside pole. Everyone's kind of pegging him as a favorite. And, even though he had that little incident with Lucas Sambert on the opening lap, he bounces back. He ends up passing Randall Woods for the race lead. And, you look at it, gets a great final restart. You think he's gone. It's over. It's a done deal. And like I said, I've seen Ward compete in all those Craftsman Series races, all those dirt races. You've seen him compete in non-points races. Not once have I seen this kid crack under pressure until Saturday. And that, I think, just goes to show you that the pressure in the ASCA's top division, the pressure in the Cup Series, it's just different, man. It's just different. It's different from anything these drivers have ever experienced. We're talking big money these guys are making. They're making the big bucks. They got the big sponsorships. That pressure, you're competing against the best of the best. Like, you can't take it easy. You got to push every lap. You have to give it 110%. And I think it finally got to Ward. I really do. And like I said, he's never cracked under pressure to me before that moment on Saturday. So I'm kind of curious to see how he bounces back. How does he respond to this? I think that it's obvious he's going to win a race very soon, and he's going to win many races down the line. But what I do want to see out of Colin Ward is, okay, how does he bounce back from losing a race like that? Like, that's an unforced error like that, essentially a choke, as what the kids would say. I want to call it a choke. I hate that word. I hate using the word choke. Um, but he blew it. He blew it basically. There's no denying it. He owned up. He owned up. He took responsibility. He blew it. And it's just going to be interesting to kind of see our response to that, because this is a kid that hasn't really had to go through much adversity throughout his ASCA career thus far. This is probably I would say this and maybe the Craftsman Championship he lost in 2024, but even that wasn't his fault. He was just kind of swept up in an accident. That was not on him. I This one though, this defeat on Saturday, that was 100% on him. So I just look to see how Colin Ward will bounce back from easily, I would say, the biggest adversity he's faced in his Cup Series career. Either he can start to get in his head too much and think too much about the pressure to perform, the pressure to compete, the pressure to win races at Ronnie Woods Motorsports, or he can put this behind him, put it to bed, and focus on the next one at West Virginia. And we'll talk more about that later in the show. But yeah, so this is going to be a pretty heavily Ronnie Woods Motorsports focused show, as it tends to be. We got a former Ronnie Woods Motorsports driver winning the race. We actually had two former Ronnie Woods Motorsports drivers win in the first 2 weeks, which is ironic, considering we thought that Ronnie Woods Motorsports now had assembled the most dominant lineup in history. But two guys that they've gotten rid of in really the past couple years go on to now win for Toyota. So how ironic is that? But then, you look at Colin Ward, but I think the even bigger story to come out of the powerhouse organization is Todd Kidd, the defending Cup Series champion, is last in points. Did you imagine we'd ever say this about Todd Kidd? Let alone just a couple months after he won the championship. And now he's sitting last in points. And to kind of put some perspective into this, Todd Kidd has finished top 5 in points every season since 2018. Every season since 2018, he's finished top 5 in points. He's finished top 3 in points every season since 2020. This is obviously not a guy that hangs out last in the standings. And, this point, it took him 7 races to score 42 points a year ago. 7 races. Now, remember, of course, ASC points work like golf. The least points, the better. So, 42 points is something that you would want after 7 races. It tells you're doing pretty darn good for yourself. This year, Todd Kidd already sits at 42 points after 2 events. And when you've got a guy like Brent Renner, who's finished second and first in the first 2 weeks of the new season, that puts Todd Kidd in a 42-point hole. Dead last on the standings, looking up at everyone, just a couple months after being on top of the world. And it's crazy how things can flip like that in this business. It really is insane. And it's certainly, I think, a humbling experience for this 9 team. And the thing has been, it's not been stuff that they can control. I guess you could argue the engine, but that's not something that Todd Kidd directly can control. That's just a downfall of the new regulations and them messing up, the turbo hybrids, so that's just, and then of course he was caught up in the accident, the only accident of the Ajax 200, which really hurt him. Only 5 cars DNF that race, and while he finished the highest of them to DNF in back-to-back weeks, he's the only driver to do that this season thus far. And he has as many DNFs this season as he had all of his title winning campaign in 2025. So is it cause for concern for Todd Kidd? Absolutely. This is massive cause for concern. In fact, I don't want to say he's completely eliminated, but I think that if he does not win by within the next couple weeks, I think he's done. And it sounds crazy to eliminate a guy, like a month into the season, but you have to consider, like last year, total, Todd Kidd and Diego Urquidy put up 71 points, be tied on 71 points. Kid's already halfway to that number, and we're only, two races into the season. So generally the champion tends to put up around, I would say, 89, anywhere between, I would say, it's tough to really put a number on it, but I'd say around anywhere between 80 to 100 points is how much the champion scores in the Cup Series. And that's with a 16 race calendar. I think now that it's 17 races, it could be a little bit higher. So let's give him a little bit more leeway. We'll say 90 to 110 points. That's how much you need to hit likely to win a championship in this business. So with that in mind, Todd Kidd's already halfway there, in two races, two DNFs. And we have another race at Ajax Super Speedway coming up. That we don't know what's going to happen there. It's one of those deals where we've got all four short track races still coming up. Again, those races incredibly unpredictable. It's just one of those deals where it's like, man, like that's a giant hole. And a lot of people might want to sweep that under the rug. Like, oh, he's got 15 more races. He can bounce back. Can he really? If Brent Renner keeps this up, he keeps these top five finishes up, he'll be eliminated by the end of the month. So I they have to win. They need wins. They need big results. Obviously, they can't control what the other 23 drivers in the sport do. And hey, there is nowhere else to go but up for Todd Kidd. But for that team, for the defending Cup Series champion, it is championship or bust. You're not happy finishing fifth in points. And with that in mind, like they have to get going this week at West Virginia. They got to come out and they have to make a statement. The problem is we don't know if Ronnie Woods Motorsports truly nailed these new regulations. Were they fast this weekend? Absolutely. But this is a road course. It's the first test of the engines unrestricted. They have great engines. The question is, do they have the aerodynamics now? And we're going to find that out at West Virginia. And that is what I am pretty excited to, I guess, find out, who comes out the fastest with the best aerodynamic package. But we'll talk more about that later in the show. But for Todd Kidd, you got to bounce back immediately. It's cause for concern. I wouldn't say DEFCON levels 5, but I'd say it's getting very close for that number 9 team, especially if they don't win this week. And he's still, outside the top 20 in points. Even if he is inside the top 20 in points, he has to mitigate the damage as much as he can to Brent Renner and Colin Ward and Ross Jackson and Carson Smith and all those other guys up towards the top of the standings, even Shane Park. Shane Park is up there as well. That's kind of the downside. So, we'll have to see if Kidd can dig his way out of this giant hole that he currently finds himself in through really no fault of his own. But let's talk Craftsman Series for a bit, and let's talk youth movement. And boy, if you did not see the Pilot Flying J100 on Friday, definitely go check that race out right now. Oh my, that battle between Tony Del Valle II and Kaden Dunham for the victory. The crazy part about this is Both of those guys, Delval is 19, Dunham is 18. So this is theoretically a rivalry that we could see in the ASCA for the next 10 to 15 years easily. Easily. Very well, it could be the next Diego versus Randall Woods, the next Diego versus Todd Kidd. That kind of sort of thing. I would say lean more so towards Diego versus Woods, because it seems like these two, every time they race each other, they get their elbows out. And in fairness, they've only raced each other like twice. But the two times that they have raced each other, we've seen tons of drama, tons of controversy. Like, these guys go at it. And it's like, they're not heavyweights yet, obviously. And that's the crazy part. They're not heavyweights, but they're racing like it. And they're still teenagers, So that part to me is the most exciting part of all, is like, these guys still have a long ways to go in their development. Specifically Caden Dunham, to win in your fourth start like that is insane. The guy had DNF'd in his first 3 starts. And not only had he DNF'd, he hadn't even made it to the halfway mark in his first 3 starts. He comes out in his fourth start and he does that. He does that around the outside of Tony Delval II for the win. I'm speechless. I'm at a loss for words, because I've never seen an 18-year-old pull a move off like that. And I have to eat my words, because I was like, last week he DNF'd again. I'm like, man, can we pump the brakes on this Caden Dunham hype? Can he actually do something to, kind of warrant the hype, the 5-star ranking, all this fanfare, the reality TV show placement? Well, he certainly did that and then some. Because this is Tony Delval II. To kind of give you some perspective, Tony Delval II was the highest graded prospect in ASCA history. And Caden Dunham just did that to him. He did that to him. Wow. And only his fourth start, at only 18 years old, when you put the perspective on it like that, it's like, the sky is truly the limit for Caden Dunham. And I'm telling you, dude, the forward development program, they got another special one on their hands, as Graham Darty's successor. And this entire youth movement as a whole, the ASCA has another special one on their hands. And I think that's the more encompassing point. You look at Graham Darty, you look at Tony Delval, you look at Gunnar Thorson, and now you throw Caden Dunham in that mix. All these guys, man, all these guys are going to rule this sport in the 2030s. They're just getting started right now, but give them a half decade to develop. Give them the rest of this decade to develop. By the 2030s, these are going to be your perennial race winners, your perennial championship contenders. So if you're a newer ASCA fan, which there's been a lot of you guys this year, definitely appreciate it. Welcome. But if you're a newer ASCA fan and you want to choose an exciting young driver to root for, you don't want to hop on the bandwagon of one of these more established older guys. You want to be there, at the start of one of these young guys' come-ups. Choose one of these 4, because they're the future. They're the future. And like I said, once we get to the 2030s, this will be their sport. And I'm all here for it. I'm loving every second of it. I cannot wait to see more Delval versus Dunham battles. I think these are the 2 heavyweight favorites of the championship. Them and Thorson. All those guys are journey to the top. I know Matt Chamberlain's leading the points, and shout out to him. But man, it's just, these young kids today are on another level. And I don't know what they're feeding these kids these days, but they most certainly can drive. It's crazy. It is crazy stuff. But let's talk silly season for a second, briefly, because let's be honest, we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew this was going to happen last year. You can't finish 20th in points in Michael White Racing equipment and expect that the team is going to sign you your contract extension. I think we kind of saw this coming for multiple years now. That extension, though, that the team signed Jared Ayers to back in 2023, that one and the Ryan Dixon contract extension back there, both of those, I think, were huge kind of learning lessons for team owners because these are two mediocre drivers that, you know, I think for Dixon, it was mainly, loyalty, why he was resigned. He had obviously been at CJ Barrymore Racing for a long time beforehand. So they wanted to get him locked down. And, they signed him to a long-term 4-year extension. And then for Ayers, it was kind of based on potential. They signed him to a 4-year extension. But I think that for team owners these days, this was a huge learning lesson. The Ryan Dixon and the Jared Ayers contract situations, a huge learning lesson that the only drivers that you should be signing to, I would say, extensions longer than 3 years would be franchise guys, superstar drivers, the Diego Urquidis, the Todd Kidds, the Randall Woodses, guys that have more than proven that they belong. It's tough to even throw Healy and Edwin in there into that camp. Like I know they're champions, but I wouldn't even throw them in that camp. Though everyone else, besides Urquidy, Kidd, and Woods, like you should be signing them to contracts that are 3 years or less, and that even goes for the young guys. The Colin Wards, the Carson Schmitz, the Braden Bennett's, the Shane Parks. You don't know what you're gonna get, and you don't want to end up in a situation like Michael I Racing and TJ Barrymore have, where they're riding out the string with these mediocre drivers, and they miss the opportunity to bring in. Well, for Michael I Racing, they really didn't to bring in Brent Renner. They ended up, coming back and doing that, but it's a tough situation. That contract just looks terrible, but obviously Ayers out. Where does he go from here? I have no idea. He's obviously damaged goods at this point. He's gonna be 28 years old next year. He's obviously not going to get another chance in a big team because he just has not developed at all. He nor Doug Bowden never really developed and kind of reined in their aggressiveness. They're still doing the same stuff that they've been doing for the past 5 years. You look at Ayers and that incident with Greg Healy in turn one with 10 laps to go in Saturday's race. Prime example. Still doing the same stuff he's been doing for the past 5 years. He just never developed, never matured. He's still the same driver that he was. And, he's a race winner. You can't take that away from him. He won the 100th annual modern era race. Fantastic. But, I mean, he's just a guy at this point. And I think that drivers like that belong at Tico Bowden Motorsports. They belong at Revolution Racing. They belong at, these bottom feeder back marker teams. I can't even throw Dexter Andy Motorsports in that camp because they've had a really solid start to the season. But you get my point. It's like they belong at the back of the grid. They don't belong in championship winning equipment. Same goes for Ryan Dixon. They just don't belong there. So maybe he goes to Snoots. If Lucas St. Bear doesn't resign, if Greg Healy doesn't resign, maybe there's an opening there. Maybe he goes to TBM. Maybe he goes, I don't know, maybe he goes down to the Craftsman Series. Maybe he retires. Maybe he pulls to Tommy Woods and calls it a career. And Petty Jr. calls it a career in his mid-20s. Who knows? But obviously, he won't be back with Mike Ward Racing, and I have a hard time believing that any other Cup team is going to want to take a chance on him. He just tears up way too much stuff. He hasn't matured. He hasn't developed at all. I'm just not seeing it with Jared Ayers. I'm done. I'm out on him. I sold his stock a long time ago. I'm out. So, yeah. Moving on to the final topic of this podcast. Let's talk West Virginia. Reading to Morgantown, fastest track in the ASCA, Craftsman Series, Cup Series, doubleheader weekend. Not in that sense. We're getting that in a month, but you get what I'm saying. Craftsman Cup. You the drill. So basically, for the Craftsman Series, I guess we'll start there. Obviously, all eyes are going to be on Tony Doval II and Caden Dunham. But I'm actually really curious to see how points leader Matt Chamberlain does. He's brought home back-to-back fourth-place finishes, which is great. Fantastic stuff. But let's see you at the first true test. Obviously, Ajax Superspeedway is an anomaly. It's Ajax Superspeedway. There's only one other race like it on the calendar. This is Computerville road course. Only one other race like it on the calendar. These oval tracks, though, let's see how he does. And we'll see if he's actually the real deal or if he's just kind of got into, like a fortunate schedule for him, if he's just really only good at plate tracks and road courses. Is he the next Colin Ward, or did he just get kind of fortunate with the way that the schedule fell? Now, I'm not going to take anything away from him running fourth, first time visiting the Streets of Computerville. That's great. But he's also 23 years old. So you kind of, it's not like with an 18-year-old kid where you're more willing to give him a couple years. Like, no, Chamberlain needs to perform now. And he has, which is great, but we'll see how he does. Is he for real, or is he just kind of a pretender, kind of up there because of circumstances? Like I said, all eyes are going to be on Tony Doval II and Caden Dunham. We've got, I believe, Chris Barrymore is in this race for Dexter Andrews Motorsports, his first Craftsman start of the season. Graham Doherty's in this race. Ross Jackson is in this race. And I believe it's either Cameron Atwood or Ian Adonde in the 60. I believe it's Adonde, but I will definitely check on that right now just to be sure. It is indeed Adonde. So we've got Doherty, Jackson, Adonde, and Chris Barrymore for the Cup guys in this race. Obviously, money's on Barrymore to win the Cup drivers. And I think money should be on him to win overall. I think that's, he's won 16 Craftsman races. He knows what he's doing here. I get it's with a new team and all that, but I can't see any of these Craftsman guys competing with him this weekend. The Cup guys, I think that Graham Doherty has the best chance to beat him, but who knows? We'll see on that one. So yeah, moving on, let's talk Cup Series here briefly. All right, so for the Cup Series, this is going to be the true litmus test. What is going to happen here with these new regulations? Who hit it? Who did not? And Michael Ward Racing, we know they've been firing in all cylinders. Flores Motorsports was actually fastest in the test at, the high-speed aerodynamic, basically new regs test about, nearly 2 months ago now, but you know what I'm saying. Back in January, Ross Jackson was fastest, but I remember Braden Bennett and Brent Renner being up there. I remember Lucas Sambert and Norm Lester being up there. So when I look at that, when I look at those test results, I I'm kind of thinking that it's not going to be Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Arkady Bros Racing up there like it was last year, especially because you got to consider, just a couple months ago, they were dumping all their resources into dealing with last year's regulations in that penultimate round at West Virginia. And that means that Diego Arkady and Arkady Bros Racing specifically, but specifically Diego, has been insanely dominant at West Virginia. It's crazy because, again, we always share this story, but with the new viewers, it kind of puts some perspective into what Diego's done. So, like his first three starts at West Virginia, his best finish was 12th. He DNF'd out of his first two starts there, 2018 and 2019. But then now you look at it, 4 out of Diego's last 5 starts at West Virginia have been wins. And the one race he didn't win, he finished third and led a bunch of laps and also clinched the championship that day, 2024. So obviously, Diego's been insanely dominant. Last time we were here, he absolutely molly-rocked the field. I don't even know how to say that, but the field left flabbergasted after what he did to them. Todd Kidd had to make an insane recovery from 6th to 3rd to win. But basically, it was Arkady Bros Racing and Ronnie Woods Motorsports in their own bracket, and there was everyone else. This year, I think it's going to be very different. And the reason I believe that is, like I said, those guys, OBR and RWM, were focused completely on last year. They were obviously developing the new regs, but they were focused on getting last year's regs right and nailing them and putting the best foot forward in the penultimate round in the West Banco 250. While the rest of the field, they were focused on this race, the Little General 200, and nailing the high-speed regs. And I think that it's going to be completely flipped. Now, I don't think that obviously those two powerhouses are going to run horribly. Definitely not. But I do think that there's going to be some new faces up at the front. And you know what? I'm going to go with Greg Healy to win the Cup race at West Virginia. I am. And it sounds kind of outlandish considering the horrible start to the season that he's had. But he was, what was he? I believe he was 3rd or 2nd. He had a great battle with Brent Renner at the end of this race last year. I think he finished 2nd. Got him at the line. They had a great battle in this race a year ago. And I just think that, he's obviously been off to a rough start. There's discussions about his contract situation. He wants to be the highest paid driver in the ASCA. So Enterprise is like, what have you done for us lately? You're like 17th in points. Why would we pay you? So he wants to remind not only Snoots, but if he does leave them at the end of the season, he wants to remind everyone why he should be the highest paid driver in the ASCA. And that's why I'm thinking Greg Healy wins it. I really believe that. I think Toyota is going to be uber competitive again. Renner, Woods, Bennett, I expect all those guys to be right up there at the front. Or even Ross Jackson, I think he's going to give these guys, the business up at the front as well. But I got my money on Greg Healy. I think Cameron Atwood's also a pretty solid choice. We'll see. CJ Barrymore Racing has not showed me much this season, but I mean, Atwood and Adonde aren't, known for their road racing abilities. Brian Dixon just got a top 5 last week. So we'll see how it goes. I get that Running West Motorsports was up there last week. They put 3 cars in the top 6, but I don't know, man. I'm just not seeing it. I think that, all the focus they put on winning Kidd that championship last year is going to come back to bite them. I'm just saying. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. I could be completely wrong. Those guys would come out as the fastest. But I think it's going to take them, a couple months to play catch up on what they missed compared to the rest of these powerhouse teams completely being focused on 2026. So we'll see. We shall see on that front. But yeah, that is it for this edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, signing out, and we'll see you after a weekend at the fastest track in the ASCA.